Welcome everyone to the CNAB community meeting. Do we have any new folks that want to introduce themselves and say hello?
Hi, I'm Trushank. I work with Jacob at Datadog.
Awesome, welcome. Anyone else? Okay, the first agenda item is the 1.0 working group approval. Does someone want to talk about that?
I can probably go through that. So for those of you who have been watching the standardization part of this for a long time, we tried to adapt, they wouldn't let us adapt. So we just had to adopt the JDF working groups method of releasing a standard. And so once you get to a release point, the next phase after finishing with your working draft is to go into working group approval. And that is basically all the members of the working group who have voting rights vote to determine whether or not the spec is at a point in which they feel comfortable releasing it. And then after that, it goes on to the organizational directors who will stamp that as the final working draft. And largely that last step is just a procedural matter. So the current candidate for the CNAB 1.0 core spec, just the core spec, we think is getting to that point where we want to freeze the specification at 1.0, and consequently the next step to freeze that is for the working group to vote on whether or not it's in an acceptable state. And is Jeremy still on? I think, Jeremy, did you guys discuss this last time? Do you remember what the outcome was?
Yeah, can you hear me? My internet's pretty bad, so if I drop off. The discussion last time was that we felt that we needed to have more validation in Duffle before we decided that the spec was done. And there were a couple of key outstanding things, I think, that hadn't been really finished yet. One of those was outputs, because that's in the core spec. And then Radu and I both went through and came up with a pretty overlapping list of things that are not implemented in Duffle right now. And I think, like, my personal opinion is the other biggest one is that we're not doing image digest validation yet, which was like the other core kind of piece. There's a couple other things, and we may have missed some. If anybody has anything else in mind, feel free to dump those things out right now. But the outputs spec, I think, or the implementation of that PR seems to be pretty close. There's a couple of small things in it. I've been working on the digest validation. I didn't finish it last week, and I've been traveling this week, so probably won't get till the end of this week. But that's where my view of it is right now.
Another part of the discussion last week was, a fortnight ago, was that if we could move the spec to a kind of draft, or some next stage, not what the words are, I can't work them out, but the next stage, so that we kind of freeze arbitrary changes in the spec and then allow Duffle to catch up with that. And if changes need to go in that we discover during that implementation phase, then fair enough, and then it can be finalized. I don't know whether there is an intermediate stage like that or what it might be called.
A spec freeze.
Yeah, something like that. Just don't know the JDF lingo.
Yeah, JDF doesn't have any. JDF leaves the working group to decide if they want extra steps for what they're working on. So we can certainly coin a step like spec freeze and go with it. I'd be happy with that.
I think we're pretty close to where I don't think we're going to have any other major changes until we uncover them through implementation. And I think more of that's going to be driven by maybe tooling beyond Duffle. So we've been hitting a couple of things in Porter that I don't necessarily think are like major changes, but they've given us kind of some complications in like, how do we actually implement this in a decent experience? And I think Ivan's hit some of those as he's been working through the Electron-based installer, specifically thinking about how parameters apply, how like the combination of required and apply to and default kind of hashes things out. But I don't think those will be major changes. So I think that at this point, it would be good to go to a frozen state so that we can try to make the tooling match, because it's been really painful, in my opinion, to try to keep cnab-go and Duffle and Porter kind of in sync, because cnab-go has been this continually moving thing, and then Duffle's been continually moving, and then like Ivan's trying to build on Duffle with the Electron installer. So it's just been this cascade of changes that have been kind of painful to deal with. So if we can get to a point where we say that it's frozen and we're not going to make any more changes, then that would be useful.
And realistically, there hasn't been any major PR to the spec or any change to the spec other than the outputs PR, which was merged maybe 10, 12 days ago.
The outputs PR hasn't been merged yet, but it will probably be merged soon. Are you talking about, but to the spec?
On the spec, yeah.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even that major. It was just removing the fields inside of outputs. So it's like, I mean, it's major enough, but it's not like super change big.
So could we do something like somebody volunteer to open a pull request that changes the README that says the core spec is in, some kind of, I nominate Urvashi to decide what the language should be. Some kind of freezy kind of situation, and then the core maintainers can approve that, and we'll choose that, use that as a kind of ad hoc voting mechanism. Does that sound like a reasonable way of making this more official?
Yep.
Yeah, so we're voting on whether to freeze the spec or not.
Yeah.
Via
Whereas
PR.
the freezing the spec will just be a PR that says something in the README about the core spec being frozen.
Yeah, I can do that later today. Okay, I feel like that's a good segue to the next agenda item, which is outstanding Duffle issues for 1.0 core. There's quite a bit. I mean, some of them Jeremy already named, like outputs, digest validation. There's core build, binary parameters, import, export, and nil default parameters. For the person who put this in the agenda, do we want to talk about each one or just high level?
I don't think it's worth talking about each one of them. The main idea here is that they fall into two major categories: the digest validation, which Jeremy is already working on, and it covers both CNAB and Duffle. And then the import-export scenario. And I think I'm not sure whether someone is working on import-export right now. The other one, the binary parameters, is something that it's an open issue, but I think we decided not to tackle it for 1.0. I'm not sure what was the final decision on binary parameters for 1.0. And then the core build, there's already a partial pull request syncing Duffle back to the changes in the spec, and we're waiting for a couple of cnab-go PRs to do a release on that. And then default nil parameters is something that we should look into. So other than outputs, digest validation, and things that we're already working on, I don't think there's other major outstanding issues. Feel free to disagree.
Okay, well, I guess if there are more outstanding issues, it'd be good to have them captured either in this list or maybe somewhere in Duffle as an issue, just so that people can see where we're at before we can lift our spec freeze.
Yeah, I think we should make a Duffle 1.0 milestone and a cnab-go 1.0 milestone, just so we can track to make sure that if we uncover anything, we should put them in there. Go, Radu.
Yeah, and it's actually the next item on the agenda was to consolidate the remaining outstanding issues. The reason I pasted all of them here is some of them are older, opened back in November or December, and tackle the area of import-export or checking the digest validation, and we've just opened more and more of them without closing previous ones. So we should really consolidate and make have a single place where if someone wants to look at the state of digest validation, look at one issue and understand what's the state of that.
I'll volunteer to backlog room tomorrow. Consolidate things.
Awesome. Okay, so that takes care of two of those agenda items. The next one is new cnab-go release. we need to review PR 82 and 85. Which is the output support in Docker. That's
I just tested out your example that you had from Docker from the Go playground, and the pathing's different from Windows to Unix, as Glenn mentioned. I just put a comment on the issue, and I think that since we're making an assumption that we're copying from a Linux container, like when it does the copy from container, it's copying explicitly from /cnab, Linux Unix style path app outputs. And then when we're rebuilding for that map, you're using file path currently, and I think that it should just use path, because when you use the file path, it's reconstructing it with Windows slashes, where it should otherwise be, I think, Linux-based paths. So that's my only comment. And I think Sylvan had a comment that there were a couple of errors that were dropped, just set to underscore. So, like my opinion, I think we should change the file path to path, and ignore Windows-based containers for now, because that's another issue, and then just fix the other issue that Sylvan mentioned. And for me, it's good to go.
Awesome. Makes sense. Yeah. Thank you so much for testing that out. We'll definitely change it to path join. And then we also have the changes that Sylvan had requested, so I can push that up later today. And I think that'll be at least it for one of the outstanding Duffle issues of supporting outputs through one driver.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And once 82 gets merged, 85 can follow immediately. It's just removing the field from the output. And I think once those two get merged, I think we can do a release so that Duffle can catch up with the changes.
Yeah, we actually implemented the outputs ourselves in Porter, and we'd like to get a cnab-go release so we can use that instead of having our own artisanal implementation.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. New issue on cnab-to-oci number 58 about storing the whole bundle.json in a registry.
Yeah, we're just wondering if anyone has any comment on this issue. Just go and check. We had some concern about the bundle not stored entirely into the registry, and we are trying to tackle that. And we're trying to use the new relocation map feature for that. So yeah, just for you to notice, to notify you that there's we are looking for comments on this issue. Please go.
Okay, awesome. So if you guys, if you're interested, take a look at that issue, add some comments, be good. If there isn't anything, can move to the next agenda item. Trishank is going to talk about GPG on YubiKeys to sign Git commits for cnab tools.
Yes, hi. So this came up randomly during one of our threads on the cnab Slack channel, where Santiago had mentioned signing tags for Duffle releases. I had mentioned using, so at Datadog, we have a repository. I'll post it to the Slack channel here, that has a script that should let you very easily set up your YubiKey. So like the one that I have here. If you just run it once, it should take you, select a joke that 15 minutes of your time could save you 15% of your cybersecurity insurance. So hopefully if you guys are interested, yeah, it should be relatively easy to set up. Let me know if you run into problems with it. Just an idea.
Do you want to quickly explain what the user experience is once you've got the YubiKey set up for that?
Oh yeah, sure. In fact, I can. Let me try to demo something right now.
You can AirPlay actually, I think.
Ah, AirPlay, but would they see?
Yeah.
Really? All right, let's see. Strippy Kiwi, right?
Yeah.
I had no idea it worked like that. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Damn, there goes all my private information. Okay, so if I make a commit here, for example, so the cnab spec, let me just roughly change something. Oh, it's nice. Okay, so if I just say git commit, oops. So it will just ask you for a bin, which should be cached. This should happen once a day. So this is a way. So there's two levels of protection when you sign git commits. One is the pin to unlock signing operation, so that let's say someone steals your YubiKey, they won't be able to unlock it immediately. If they get it wrong 3 times, you need an admin pin on top of that to unlock the user pin. This is the user pin. So if you get a user pin wrong 3 times, it's blocked. You need the admin pin. If you get the admin pin wrong 3 times, that's it. You basically need to reset your YubiKey. So that's protection from physical attacks. So let me quickly. And then I touch on top of that. So if there's malware sitting on my computer trying to get me to sign something, oh yeah, you guys can see that I touched my YubiKey. I'm not sure, but yeah, I had to touch it too. So you unlock the GPG signing key once a day. You can change that to once a week, once a month if you like. It's a configuration in GPG. And then you just press the button every time you sign something. So it should be the only time I found that touching the YubiKey is a pain point is when you are when you are rebasing. That can be really painful. But then there's an option to rebase to tell it to not use GPG, and I can talk about that. But other than that, it should be fairly smooth like this. So. Yeah, on GitHub, and then you can see the the verified, the green verified warm fuzzy feeling button. Yeah, so it should be as relatively as simple as that. That's the whole point of putting the GPG keys and YubiKey is so that someone who gets to your computer can't run away with the key. They can't exfiltrate the key. One of the downside, of course, is that you can't back up the key because it's generated in YubiKey. So unless you're YubiKey or a nation-state actor, it should be impossible to get the key. So I recommend also spending another 15 minutes later, not right now, setting up a backup YubiKey with an entirely different key and register it with GitHub or your SSH server so that you can, hot swap it when necessary. Does this all roughly make sense? Cool. Yeah, there's a little dance revolution kind of game that I like to joke about you have to do because there's this user pin and admin pin you have to change. You don't have to change it, but someone who gets to your YubiKey can, if they know you're using the default values, unlock it. So, and I recommend saving the pins in 1Password if you use it, or any password manager that you use, so you can easily copy and paste it if you like. Yeah, so yeah, hopefully it's as easy and as transparent as possible.
Did you just use GPG and easy in the same sentence?
Trust me, I've hidden away a lot of the difficulty of setting it up for you. If I could automate the GUI bits with AppleScript, that would be great, but someday.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
Okay. I refreshed and there's another agenda item. Do we want to outline how runtimes should handle action lifecycle? This is issue 237.
Yeah, so this is an issue that my teammate Leah brought up about a week ago. This is something we've kind of run into repeatedly as we're trying to do the outputs PR for Duffle. And so the situation mostly is that Duffle treats the install action as like a single time invocation, success or failure. And so what ends up happening is, you can imagine in the failure state, you've run the install action, but maybe only partially. Maybe it failed like halfway through its deployment. And then you would have to run the upgrade action next, even though like maybe installation never fully completed. And so we started looking into whether or not the spec actually outlined what the correct kind of lifecycle behavior should be, because we were actually implementing this different in our own CNAB runtime. We were basically saying that install should be able to be rerun again until such time as it reaches a successful run. And then from that point on, you would have to run upgrade. And so we just wanted to get some clarification in the spec as to the correct behavior in this, and make sure that that got outlined in the specification so that runtimes actually implemented that behavior correctly. So this issue basically outlines that. If folks would take a look and comment, that would be really appreciated.
What we did on Docker app is we said we can't be sure what's been done. So the safest thing to do is to mark the install as failed, or the installation has failed, and then allow the people to go back, and you can do an uninstall. So the uninstaller should be able to handle a failed install and then do a new reinstall. But maybe upgrade could be intelligent enough in your implementation to see a failed install and then do the right thing. I think when you start playing with, if you've got containers and cloud service infrastructure and a bunch of other things, a botched install could be really messy. So you may have zero guarantees. I don't know if Matt's thought more about this,
But I agree with Ryan. If it's in a failed state, it's in a failed state. You have to get it out of that failed state before you can run anything else on it, right? I mean, update on a failed state doesn't make sense to me. So I agree with you, Ryan. It's in a failed state. So what's the next state that can happen? It's not installed, so I can't run upgrade or update.
So I guess either way here, there's an action item of clarifying it in the spec.
Right.
Is rollback on failure a third option for something we would want to have in there? That if it fails, if the bundle's response, that puts a lot of burden on the bundle developer. But is that something we would want to?
I think that like the minimum expectation is just to outline what the runtime expects of the bundle author. I think like there's a bunch of options on the table. Like the expectation is that if an install fails, the runtime will mark it as failed, and therefore like whoever's actually running the install process should have to uninstall or go through some particular thing to make that work. Then that means that like uninstall actions have to handle a case that like they might be dealing with an installation that's only partially installed. You could say install actions have to be reentrant, so therefore like if an install process is reinvoked a second time where the process is like halfway through, that like the bundle author would have to understand that the process should be reentrant, and therefore like you're going to pick up from some midway installed state. It just, yeah, whatever the particular decision is, like it should be outlined so that bundle authors at least understand how to handle those particular cases.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what to do if upgrade fails or if uninstall fails.
Maybe we don't be that prescriptive, but just say that these are the options. I don't know.
Yeah, this feels like something that could be one of the non-normative sections for some of these cases. I agree with Matt that if we start prescribing too much, it may add too much work for bundle developers. If you have to make it so it can automatically roll back, that adds a whole lot of complexity. So if we just let tools kind of do the right thing, maybe that's the best, where we have a very low bar, and then if you add stuff on top, that's great.
Okay, awesome. So I think we'll start with like comments on that issue, and maybe people could outline what they've done in their different runtimes. That shows us what options you can take. And then maybe a step after that is like in addition to the non-normative section. Okay, anything else on this one?
Is this a blocker for freezing the spec?
That's a good question.
I feel like given the definition that was given earlier, it would be definitely the sort of thing where if we decided it needed a change in the spec, this qualifies as like bug fixy kinds of stuff and not new feature. So I would be okay with adding this later.
Okay. I'm going to refresh agenda items one more time, see if anybody added anything. I think we're good. Is there anything else someone would want to bring up right now to talk about? Okay. Well, thanks everyone. See you next time.
Right.